Welcome on in, golf fans. It's your boy Gsluke here with our course breakdown for this week's Sony Open. Gonna talk all things Waialae Country Club, give you guys all the goods for this week, including some course details, a hole-by-hole breakdown. We'll go through my modeling and key stats over there on Bet the Number, as well as a few comp courses around the PGA Tour that are going to play similar to what we get this week. So by the end, you'll be an expert on the venue for this PGA Tour stop to give you guys a good idea of what to research in your players to make some of your top DFS choices and some of your potential outright bets as well. There's a lot to go through. Let's not waste any time at all and go ahead and start it off with, first off, a look at some of the course details for the Sony Open. Now, I'm a bit sick, so bear with me here a little bit, guys. Might sound a little nasally or raspy in the voice, but we're going to chuck through and try and give you guys a full breakdown here. So starting off with these course details, we've got a much different course than what we had at the Century. We had a par 73 last week, very atypical for what we get on tour. This week, a much more traditional par 70 setup. We've also got ourselves a Seth Rayner design and a golf course that's a lot flatter than what we had for the Kapalua Plantation course. That track kind of resembled Augusta National with some of the elevation changes that you got down those volcanic slopes. This week, it's only like a 10-yard difference from the highest to the lowest portion of this track. So little to no undulation, little to no elevation change to worry about, and more of target and track band golf that you're going to get around this kind of track. It's Bermuda grass from tip to toe, so that's similar to what you had at Kapalua. The green sizes also well above the PGA Tour average, so not quite the nearly 9,000 square foot greens that you had at the Plantation course, but just over 7,000 square foot is markedly larger than what we usually see out here on tour. You've got 5 water hazards in place, so something that you've got to keep an eye on for a few of the holes out there, but at the Seth Rayner design, it is not a difficult golf course. You've got pretty much easy to hit greens. The greens aren't all that much sloped, and unless it starts to crank out there with the wind, you're going to get scoring averages of 1 to even 3 strokes under par. So when we take a look at some of these averages over here on Bet the Number, which by the way, the sponsor of this video here, so make sure to use code Gsluke when you're signing up for a discount off any membership there. But you can see the only average that is harder than the PGA Tour average is going to be this fairway in regulation rate that is about 2% lower than what we're used to seeing on tour, mostly because of first off the dog legs and also how narrow those fairways are. Outside of that aspect, everything else is going to be easier than your PGA Tour average. So your green regulation rate nearly 6% higher than usual, your scrambling rate about 2.5% higher than what we're used to seeing, and if you go out through all these different averages, you'll see that they're easier than your PGA Tour average course. So it is a quote-unquote birdie fest, but it really depends on how firm and fast this place is playing for what you're going to see on a winning score. If it's a drier year, closer to 10 to 13 under. If it's going to play a little bit more receptive, you could see something like 20 or maybe even a little bit better than 20 under par winning at this par 70 setup. So not quite the minus 35 that Hideki Matsuyama won at, but it's also not a difficult golf course. We're going to see something in the single digits go out there for the winning score. So you can see last year, Grayson Murray ended up winning. First off, rest in peace to Grayson. Tragic story that we had there. But what I'm going to focus on here with this averages is the fact that it's a relatively balanced golf course. Your top finishers mostly were into the green in all 4 categories, and they weren't carrying themselves in one specific category. The one thing that I think was especially notable last year at this event was the emphasis on around the green. You can see all those top starters the whole way down to JT Post in here were all dark green in the around the green category. We go back to the year before that. That's the year that Siwoo Kim ended up winning. A little bit less around the green emphasis that year, but still very balanced across the board. And the one trend that I really noticed from 2023 were some of those guys finishing in 3rd to 5th place that did lose strokes off the tee. So with the short setup here, the fact that you're going to miss fairways by default because of how narrow they are, it kind of makes sense that guys would play well despite losing off the tee. And if we go to the year before that, still a very balanced shots gained metrics profile for those guys that are finishing towards the top. But once again, a few of those top end finishers, Michael Thompson, maybe the biggest example of guys that didn't play that well off the tee, but still got it done at that golf course. Part of the reason for that is that it isn't really known as a driver's paradise. This is a golf course where you have those 14 fairways in play, and you're hitting driver on maybe 7 or 8 of those holes. And even when you're not hitting driver, it's sometimes difficult to hold the short stuff. So your approach distribution, it is balanced for the most part, but you're not going to have very many longer shots. A majority of your irons, particularly on the scoreable holes, are going to be coming from either 50 to 125 or maybe that 125 to 175 range. So you can see in total there, that is, what is that, about 5 shots per round that are coming from 50 to 125, about the same that are coming there from 125 to 175. So right there, that's about 10 of your 18 shots coming in one of those two categories. So when we go through the custom modeling on BTN, we'll talk about that a little bit more later, but that's what you get at these shorter, more positional golf courses, is when you're not laying up off the tee, you're going to have something like 50 to 125, and when you're laying up, laying a little bit further back, it's probably going to be that 125 to 175 range. Around the green, there's a lot of shots coming off the fairway, but a little bit more coming out of the rough as well, as this is a golf course where you actually have rough around the green, unlike some of the holes at the Century. And then over here with your putting distribution, not that much that has to be said, but you're going to have a lot of putts for birdie from 15 to 20 feet this week. So once again, we'll talk about that when we get to the BTN model here a little bit later. But before we do so, I want to go hole by hole, give you a little taste of this golf course and for the shots required around Waialae. For this hole-by-hole breakdown, we're going to have a few holes that are changed to par 4s, including hole number 1, which for members is played as a par 5, but for these tour pros is going to be a par 4. So how they change it up is they move it up 1 tee box, make it a little bit closer to 500 yards, which is still a very stiff par 4, but it's going to play a lot easier than if it was 530 yards. So their tee shots are getting out a little bit further. This fairway bunker to the right is not in play for these tour pros, and if it's playing downwind, the real quote-unquote trouble off the tee here would be hitting it far left into this out of bounds, but that's not in play unless you have that kind of wind direction. It's still a tough 2-shotter. You can see it's about a 200 shot into the green for most of these players. That's actually probably a little bit too far up, that first target that we set. Let's put it back closer to like 310, 320, about 200 yards for a lot of those tour players. Hole 2 is 428, so this is more of your traditional par 4. You can see the emphasis on driving accuracy right off the bat. You've got water down the left, you've got bunkers down the right, and this is a narrow landing area, especially when you compare it to what we had at the Century. Around the greens themselves, they don't have that much oomph to them. They're not the hardest test that you have out there in tour, but off the tee, it can get a little dicey here around Waialae. Hole 3 is 420 yards, also have the water down the left side, so it's playing right along that same water boundary, and unless it's a left side pin location, the water is more so a problem off the tee, but this golf course, and in terms of its green complexes, certain pin locations can be absolute death, whereas if they put it in that back right corner, or even this front right corner, it's not that big a deal over there at hole number 3. Hole 4 is 205 yards, so a longer par 3. You do have a lot of depth to work with here, but there's a lot of slope that you have on this green as well, at least compared to some of the other greens that we have around Waialae. It's got that classic Seth Rayner par 3 look to it. You've got all the bunkers surrounding this green, so it's a classic design. You've seen this on a lot of those Seth Rayner golf courses, and it's the long par 3. You see it on pretty much every track he designs. Hole 5 is 466, so a longer par 4. The tee shot here does play slightly downhill, so you're getting a little bit of extra rollout off the tee here, but it's one of the harder holes that we have around this track. It's one of the longer par 4s that we have on site, and a lot of times we'll play directly into the wind. Hole 6 is 470 yards. It actually plays a little bit easier than what you have at hole 5, despite being just a hair longer, mostly because of that wind direction, which sometimes comes into play. Hole 7 is 170 yards, so it's I'd say pretty typical, pretty traditional par 3 that we have here. This back right pin can be a little bit tricky. Also, this front left pin that is tucked just over the bunker and has the bunkers protecting it to the left. The reason why that one's difficult, you mishit it, you're in the bunker short, you pull it a little bit, you're one of those bunkers to the left side, and you don't have a lot of room to work with in terms of getting up and down. Hole 8 is 460, so this is a longer par 4. This one, though, it's a pretty wide open tee shot. Like, if you miss it to the right, you're gonna have enough room, and it's only gonna be like 180 yards, where, you know, it's a bad shot if you flail it out to the right, but you can still easily hit the green in 2. And if you miss left, you pull it a little bit off the tee. Most of these guys have enough distance to carry that corner, so this tee shot not nearly as difficult as 5 and 6 in my opinion, and the scoring averages normally reflect that too. Hole 9 is 508 yards. This is a par 5, so this is not converted to a par 4, and this is an absolute cupcake hole, as you would imagine. It is 500 yards. Sometimes it plays into that prevailing breeze, but at just 510, everyone is reaching this in 2. Hole 10, so starting on the back, they will have guys starting on holes 1 and 10 this week, just because of the setup. But hole 10, 350 yards, it is the much easier side to start on. It can be drivable if they choose to move up the tee boxes, but that's not something that they're going to do the first few days. It might be something they do over there on moving day, but even if they don't, it's a pitch and putt par 4, something that you can easily start with a birdie on. Hole 11 is 196 yards. This does play into the prevailing breeze most times, and it's a really awkwardly sharp shaped green. If you have the pin location over here to the front right, it's a really difficult hole. A front left pin location though, and it's one of the easiest par 3s on the golf course. So a lot of it comes down to wind with how exposed it is out there to the water, but also pin location there at 11. Hole 12 is 435, so this is a medium length par 4, usually plays downwind, so it's one of the easier holes that you have out there. Also, a lot of room to the right off the tee to miss. Hole 13 is a converted par 4, so this is, on paper, it looks a lot easier than what it actually is, because it's not a par 5 like it says. In this one, you do have an up tee box, so your tee position is going to be a lot closer to where I moved it there. Your tee shot, you can also be a little bit more aggressive off the tee because of the moved up tee box, but you can see if you miss to the right, you could have some tree trouble, which does come into play, and if you pull it to the left off the tee here, you don't play a fade down the proper, shot shape down this hole, you're down the trees on the left. So this is a very difficult par 4. Hole 1 is usually one of the harder holes as well. These converted par 4s are just make a par and run. Even though they are shortened compared to where you have them as par 5s, they are not easy to go out there and par. Hole 14 is 438, so it goes the opposite direction. A little bit of dogleg from right to left, and because it narrows down at this corner, a lot of people will just throttle back with a driving iron or a 3-wood to the corner. Hole 15 is 394, so this is also mid-length par 4, but what you're going to get here is a lot of people laying up to the corner. This is set at 260, which would be a driving iron off the tee, because if you hit a driver, just like last hole, it makes it really difficult to hold this kind of angle. You're coming in diagonally across the corner there, and it's easy for a right-hander to push through that fairway to the right, and if you overturn it, it's easy to catch one of those trees and then end up in a really bad spot as well. Hole 16 is 441. This is the most difficult tee shot that you have on this golf course, and it doesn't look that hard because you see this marker out here at 290. That's a 3-wood for most of these players. You say, oh, you just take a driver over the corner. The issue or the perspective that you can't get from this overhead view is that this tree in the corner is absolutely fucking massive. No other way to put it. It is an absolute tower out there, and there's next to no chance that you're hitting it over that thing unless you're Rory McIlroy, something like that. So what these players have to do is they have to either hit a 3-wood to the corner or try and draw a driver around that tree, and you see a lot of people overhooking it into the trees there or hitting it into the shit on the right. So this hole, it'll be one of the top 5 most difficult there, and it doesn't look that hard. I mean, it's 440 out there on the scorecard. It plays a lot harder than that. Hole 17 is 191, so this is another coastal par 3. You can see hole 11's over there, the other par 3 that we have on the back. Really awkwardly shaped green here. So if it's a front right pin, you have all that room there. Super easy. You might even see an ace like we've seen a few times on this hole. Back left pin location, it's one of the harder holes on the entire course. And then 18 is a par 5. You get to finish off with a scoring look. And this is the hole that Hideki Matsuyama hit that 3-wood to like 3 feet. It's reachable in 2. The more aggressive you are off the tee, the easier it is to reach. But a lot of players, because you once again have this dog leg and these really narrow fairways, it's why the fairway rate's only 57% around here. If you hit a driver, it's almost impossible to even hold the short stuff. So what a lot of people do, I think the prudent play at 18 is just to hit a 3-wood to the corner, then you hit a 3-wood onto the green. It's 2 3-woods. It's not an easy hole to go out there and execute, but if you take on the risk of a driver and you can't carry that far left bunker, which by the way, you'd say like, oh, it can't be that hard to cover it. It's 300 yards, and a lot of times it's into a little bit of wind. So a lot of that depends on wind direction. If it's downwind, you'll see guys really cutting off this corner. In fact, you'll see guys way out here at like 330, 350 with 150 yards in. But it's a lot different if you have it into the wind or in a neutral wind direction. So a great finishing hole, definitely one you're going to have to birdie if you're likely going to win. But you're going to see a lot of birdies there. It is reachable in 2, but maybe not as easy as it looks like on paper. Now that we've gone through the golf course and the shots required, let's go through our custom modeling over here on Bet the Number and what we're looking for in some of our players this week. Of course, guys, Bet the Number, a great resource for all of this, and perhaps my favorite tool that they have over there on their site is their custom modeling and their key stats tab, because not only can we see what they're looking for in their players this week, we can also adapt their model, change it, and fine tune it to exactly what we're looking for as handicappers. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to go through what they're looking for in players to give you guys an idea of some of those key stats out there this week. So the first one we have over here is distance from the edge of fairway. This is a way to look at some of the more accurate drivers of the ball, and going hole by hole, you guys could see the emphasis on that category. So if we go through this, you'll see some of the better drivers that we have in the field, and the lower the number over here on the left, the better they are in terms of hitting fairways. So you can see towards the top, we got guys like Matt McCarty, Brian Harmon, Ben Coles, some of your more positional players up there towards the top. So not so much a surprise that we're getting those kind of players showing up, but I wanted to point that out at a positional golf course like this. In terms of approach play, we're looking at regular approach. Let me see the actual sample size that they're looking at. That's going to be over the last 44 measured rounds, and this is a good way to look at a player's just baseline when it comes to their iron play. So not so much I want to talk about here, something you always want to be including in your modeling though. The more important aspects of what we're going to talk about over here to the right. So in terms of handicapping, Waialae Country Club in particular, shots gained around the green is absolutely vital. This is a golf course with grainy around the green conditions, just like you saw out there at the Century. So just like last week, we're looking at courses where you have around the green that's Bermuda grass and that kind of test around the green. So some of your top players would be a Mackenzie Hughes, Benny Ann, who did play at the Century, JT Poston, pretty good on grainy Bermuda grass, and you can see some of your other top finishers there as well. Maybe a few names to keep an eye on: Harry Hall, Daniel Berger, who had himself quite a good fall swing, Lucas Glover, Ben Griffin, guys that I think you're going to see a lot of people playing and betting outright this week, all towards the top of that around the green list. We also want to look at putting on this kind of grainy Bermuda grass. It's a different test on and around the greens with this type of grass. You've got Royal Hisatune towards the top of the Bermuda grass list. Russell Henley, who's also had a lot of success around this golf course. You can see 4th, 2nd, and 11th place finishes over his last 4 starts. Hideki Matsuyama, past champion at this event, also won at the Century on the same type of grass on the greens. You've got guys like Thomas Dietrich towards the top, Mackenzie Hughes. I mean, look at that. Popper both around the green and with the putter on Bermuda grass, and a few of the other top finishers you can see on that list as well. And now a few other very specific stats that we're looking at for this course. You've got left rough tendency, and what this is telling us is how much of the time guys are missing to the left. And the reason why you're doing this, and you may have caught this when you're going through the hole by hole breakdown, are those dog legs usually go from right to left. And the way that you can miss and really screw up your round around Waialae Country Club is if you miss in those left trees. Because if you miss in the left trees, not only are you going to be completely blocked out by the trees there, but you're going to have to pitch out sideways and maybe even pitch down to the dog leg to have a shot at the green. You're not going to have any way of salvaging par on that sort of hole. You're looking at bogey at best, if that would be a miraculous bogey if you can save it, and probably double or a triple. So this left rug tendency, a lot of these guys that are towards the top of this list are guys that are faders of the golf ball, guys that aren't missing left all that often. So you can see up there, Daniel Berger only misses left 2% of the time. That's massive. That is an absolute gold nugget on this sort of golf course. Tom Kim doesn't miss left often. You've got guys like Corey Connors, Mark Hubbard that are known for being able to avoid that left side of the golf course that are going to get a little bit of a bump in Bet the Numbers modeling this week. So this is something that they did last year. I pointed it out on the course breakdown as a really sharp nugget, and I'm glad they're going back to it here for 2025. Also looking at approach out of the rough, so if you end up missing the fairways, which is almost inevitable with some of the water around this track, who are the best players at hitting out of that rough? You can see Daniel Berger towards the top, and by the way, guys, Daniel Berger is one of my favorite players, period, in all of golf, so I like finding reasons to play Daniel Berger, and all these numbers are pointing to him this week, so you guys can probably tell I'm going to be playing some Daniel Berger myself, but a few other guys towards the top, Mav McNeely, he's been in some really good form, Nate Lashley, maybe more of a surprise there, but players that could really make a difference this week. Seamus Powers, the number 7 ranked play out there in their modeling. They got Russell Henley at number 1 in the Bet the Number model up there towards the top. Corey Connors, Hideki past champion here. So good that we're seeing guys with course history popping up in this category. Like Hideki, Corey Connors has played well here. Same thing with Henley as we mentioned before. But even guys like a Nick Hardy, Seamus Power, both have some top finishes around Waialae Country Club. So perhaps it's because of their prowess in this sort sort of stat category. And then the last one we're going to look at is putting from 8 to 20 feet. This is where a lot of your shots gained putting are going to come from at a golf course like this, where you can't really take on every single pin location. You're not always going to be hitting it to 5 feet and making putts. A lot of times it's going to be those putts from 8 to 20 feet that are really making the difference with your shots gained metrics. So a few guys to point out, you've got some small sample size poppers towards the top, but like a Mackenzie Hughes, a Nicholas Echeverria, he's a really good putter on Bermuda grass as well. Same thing with Mackenzie, Vince Whaley, Taylor Montgomery, always one of the best putters that we have out here. But look at this. There's Matsuyama popping up from the 8 to 20 foot range. There's Harry Hall popping up, who we were looking at the around the green numbers a little bit earlier on. Sepp Straka, not always the best putter on Bermuda grass, but good from the 8 to 20 foot range. Same thing out there with Benny Ann. Not always the best Bermuda putter, but look at this, right? From 8 to 20 feet, he's been his best self on this type of surface. You could throw Keegan Bradley, Emiliano Grillo. Hell, we could even throw somebody like Thomas Dietrich into that category that you might not have expected to see towards the top of these putting numbers, but that are going to be getting a little bit of a bump in the bet the number model. If we put all of that together, take a look at the best players in the field. Number one, Russell Henley in the bet the number model, which you would kind of expect for his perfect course fit around here. Accurate off the tee, good on Bermuda grass, was good in some of the advanced stat categories that we were looking at. No complaints for having Russell Henley at the top. There's Lucas Glover, also more positional, more accurate player that's better on Bermuda grass, so I would have expected to see him up there. The first real surprise is Daniel Berger, but there are no complaints from me on that. He's been okay at this golf course. You take a look at his last 5 starts. They've come from a while ago. Last time here was 2021 for Daniel Berger, but he made the cut in every start around the Sony Open. So I think that's a pretty good data point out there for D Bergs. You've got Doug Gim, number 5. You got Seamus up there, number 7. There's Echeverria. I love him as well. One of my favorite players. He's made the cut both times here too, which if you know Echeverria, him making the cut at a golf course is not always a given his wide range of outcomes. But Ben Griffin, number 11, I'll probably be taking a few looks at him this week on whether to play him. Kurt Kitayama, I mean, look at these approach stats. I mean, how could we not want to look at Kurt Kitayama at this kind of course? We'll have to deep dive him in some of our content this week. There's Grillo. He's shown up a few times. He hasn't had the best track record around here, but maybe it's his year this time around. All guys that are worthy of some consideration here in 2025. And now that we've talked through our custom modeling, let's go through a few comp courses around the PGA Tour that should play similar to what we get at Waialae. And comp number 1 is going to be the Bermuda Butterfield Championship. It's got yourself Port Royal Golf Club, another short positional Bermuda grass track where it's more about your accuracy off the tee and then making a bunch of putts on Bermuda than it is, some of these other longer, more off the tee heavy golf courses. You see a lot of the same sort of players showing up on these leaderboards, and if you just take a look at this year, you can see what I'm talking about. Like Andrew Novak, not the longest player, but Mark Hubbard, Lauer, Sam Ryder, Ben Griffin, Lipsky, like all these shorter, more plotter sort of players are the ones that we saw on that leaderboard this year. But it's not just this year where that applies. It's pretty much every year at the Bermuda Championship. You got Camilo winning last year. I mean, enough said right there, right? Older, more positional sort of player. But there's Alex Noren, guys like Carl Wan has played well at the shorter tracks. If you go back to the year before that, Seamus Power ended up winning at the Bermuda that year. By the way, Seamus showed up towards the top of our modeling here for this week. There's Thomas Dietrich, who also showed up towards the top of the list. By the way, Dietrich looked really good at the Century, so maybe some positive momentum that you can get going at this event. There's Ben Griffin once again, Patrick Rogers showing up a few times, guys like Waialae, Denny McCarthy, right? Some of the better putters that we have on the PGA Tour. No brainer that they're showing up at this sort of golf course. Next one we're going to go with is TPC Southwind. So this is going to be the home of the FedEx St. Jude Championship. It's another Bermuda grass track from tip to toe. It's short, it's only about 7,000 yards, and it's more positional off the tee, and you have the same kind of shots as you have at this kind of golf course. This is a higher level field, so this is an elite level field that we have at Southwind. So you're going to have guys like Hideki, Hovland, Scheffler, all of those guys in the field. But what you'll notice about some of like the lower tier guys that showed up is, let's find some of the guys that we wouldn't be used to seeing, like Nick Dunlap, really good putter on Bermuda. He showed up that week. Denny McCarthy showing up again. Billy Ho, a infamous Bermuda grass putter. Look at this, Seamus Power there in 10th place. Another guy that showed up a ton throughout this preview already and winner at this event, or Bermuda Championship, I should say. Go to the next one. There's Lucas Glover. Oh, number 2 on our modeling this week. Okay, that's good to see. Let's go through a few other surprises. Taylor Moore. Oh, he won in Florida, another Bermuda grass track. Big surprise that a good Bermuda putter would be showing up here. There's Corey Connors. There's Russell Henley, who has such a good track record around here. Go to the year before that. That's when Zalatoris won. But look at that. Glover showing up again. There's Brian Harmon, quintessential Bermuda grass short track killer. Same thing with Matt Fitzpatrick. And by the way, our last comp course kind of ties in Matt Fitzpatrick here. It's Harbortown Golf Links, so home of the RBC Heritage. The reason why I really like that one as a comp is it's short, it's positional off the tee. You've got more trees in play for sure than what you're going to have this week, but you've got to be accurate off the tee. You've got those really tricky Bermuda greens that are comparable to what we're going to have for this event. So this will load here in a second, but when we go through these leaderboards, it has been a signature event the last 2 years. So kind of like what we had for the last event we went through, there's some issues with the talent gap difference, but let's look at some of the guys that popped up that we might not have expected to. JT Poston, enough said, another one of these short Bermuda grass killers. You've got Patrick Rogers showing up again, who, by the way, the Patrick Rogers being good at short courses is kind of weird because you would actually expect his skill set to translate better to longer, more demanding ball striking tests. But I mean, look at that. Rogers just time and time again showing up. You got Chris Kirk there. Go to the year before that. That's when Matt Fitzpatrick won. Jordan Spieth's better at these sort of tracks. But if you look at some of the poppers that you didn't expect to see, there's Brian Harmon, there's Mark Hubbard who's showing up, there's Taylor Morgan, and then there's Ches Reavie. Just, I mean, the perfect example of one of those plotter sort of players. And then the year before that is when Jordan Spieth won. A few of the guys that you might have been surprised to see. Matt Kuchar is a winner at this golf tournament, so you can see him finishing in third. Shane Lowry, JT Poston again, Sepp Straka again. It's like these guys, Straka, Poston, you just play them at these sort of golf courses. So, you know, we get one of those kind of players or that type of skill set in this field, and I'm going to be a huge buyer long term. Alrighty, guys, that is all I've got out there for the course breakdown this week. Before you hopping out of here, go ahead and smash that like button for me, and also comment down below what you've got as the winning score for a chance to earn a free month on my Patreon page. If you guys can give me the correct winning score, you'll win a free month access to my Patreon, where I'm posting all my projections, modeling for any given week, as well as my showdown projections, outright bets, and prop bets out there for rounds 1 through 4. So if you want to get all of that, make sure to comment down below your winning score, and it'll be on a first come, first serve basis. So make sure early bird gets the worm. Go ahead, get your comment down there earliest for a chance to earn that free month of the Patreon page. Best of luck with all of your exposure this week, whether it's on the DFS side or over there with any outright bets. Hopefully you guys can cash out and get into the green, and we can make the Sony Open one to remember. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you guys for stopping by and enjoying the content, and let's get it throughout the rest of the week.